Since this game came out, there have been intermittent requests for me to do my lore mystery styled content on Kingdom Come Deliverance II. Actually doing it never seriously occurred to me until my recent playthrough, and sure enough, as everyone told me there would be, this game has a fair whack of worthy curiosities, so I thought what harm can come from testing the waters. It could sprawl into a multiple dozen video long playlist, or it could just be 3 or 4. But if you've been around this channel for any length of time, you'll know this caliber of content is always where I'm going to feel the most comfortable. So now that Kingdom Come Deliverance II firmly has my fascination by the Nadgers, I feel to not explore the more mysterious finds within it would certainly be doing this channel a disservice, not to mention this fantastic game. I know I'm a year late, but in my defense, that's earlier than I am on average. So with that out the way, all that remains is to identify where to begin. And as it so happens, I might just know exactly where to start. On our travels across early 15th century Bohemia, there are many chance encounters to be had with wayfarers. Some prove harmless, others unremarkable, some are funny. Some are blatantly absurd, but every once in a blue moon an encounter sticks with you for much longer, like something about it felt out of place, as if something didn't add up. Maybe you've had such an interaction in your actual life, like someone before you just didn't seem right. Maybe you've met me. But self-deprecation aside, there are at least a couple interactions in Kingdom Come Deliverance II that fit that bill. In today's video, we're going to be exploring one of these. On our travels, we can encounter a wayfaring itinerant barber-surgeon merchant, a man who possesses not impossible but most certainly unlikely knowledge. He speaks cryptically and leaves even the most skeptical among us questioning his very nature. He has a very distinct name that leaves an imprint on the mind of any who hear it. I am, of course, talking about Balthazar. And to understand what makes this fellow so interesting, well, you'll see. First, we need to invoke an encounter with him, which requires a bit of trial and error, it must be said. This game has countless encounters, so how do you guarantee the one you're looking for will crop up? And the answer, of course, is you don't. To make matters worse, my research leads me to believe that Balthazar might be on the rarer side of encounters. I went my entire playthrough, for instance, and didn't cross paths with him once, so that would track. It's only when I crossed paths with an entirely different curiosity that I started Googling and found out about Balthazar, and then went through steps to try and activate the encounter. And sure enough, it would seem there is an optimal time and an optimal place for him to spawn. For me, I found that to be towards the back end of our narrative time in the Trotsky region. After we've finally been granted access to this glorious castle, considering the escalation of narrative beats, it's natural to not step away and continue exploring. And that's a shame because the time we spend here in the grand scheme of things is rather brief. However, if we do opt to step away and out into the surrounding countryside, then it seems with a smidgen of trial and error, Balthazar can be reliably spawned if you pass the roadside camps on the way from Troskovich to Zhelyov. Where I found joy was at this camp at a crossroads, which is oddly fitting when we get deeper into it, and an indicator that if you pass it enough times by saving before fast travelling to a destination that requires Henry to pass this camp en route will eventually yield results is if every time you do this a different encounter spawns here. But we aren't looking for a travelling group of nomads, an unsightly bunch of bandits, or a wandering troupe of performers. We're looking for a rather distinct lone man. He wears a blue tunic, has funky pants, and wears a chaperon you wouldn't associate with a wayfarer. Nevertheless, he would seem friendly. If we fast travel to his location, we're given the following message. There's a wayfarer sitting in a small camp beside the road. He's an ordinary man in plain clothes. He glances at you and gives a slightly forced smile. Upon our approach, he'll invite us over. In his own way.
Either you have something to sell, or we never saw each other.
Should we initiate dialogue with the man, things get strange quickly. We'll go through it bit by bit and break it down as we go, but here's how it begins.
Greetings. Where are you going? Oh, don't worry. I'm no footpad.
And I'm no hawker. But pray tell, what ails you, friend?
Plenty. But nothing you can help me with, I'm sure.
Can you be quite sure of that? I tend to be quite skilled at relieving people of pain and other afflictions, Henry.
Wait, how do you know my name?
It's this confounded nature of mine. I loiter around, I listen, and I remember.
Hold on. What's your name and how do you know me? In whose service are you?
Naturally, there is a master I serve, though not in the manner you might think. And as for my name, I am... Balthazar.
We'll come back to his rather distinct name in a minute, but most interestingly, the man knows who he's speaking to. He knows about Henry of Skalitz. He has limited means to know that. Henry recently arrived in the region a common outsider, in the service of Sir Hans Capon of Perkstein, a lord most in the Trotsky region have never heard of. To add insult to injury, upon arrival in the region, that company is attacked, and it's presumed there were no survivors, instigating quite the headache to prove Sir Hans's identity. Even then, Henry's identity is of limited consequence. Those who know him know through first-hand accounts. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not going to accommodate most of the region, and the pool of individuals who will care about who Henry is smaller again. So this random wayfarer we have never met before knowing who Henry is unlikely, albeit not impossible. After all,
I loiter around, I listen, and I remember.
It is not implausible that word of mouth somehow reached this fellow. It is an RPG after all. Henry is rather adept at the art of side questing, but I don't suspect that's the explanation the game is gunning for. We can press Balthazar and find out more about what he knows about Henry.
If you know me so well, then surely you know why I'm here.
Actually, no. In point of fact, because everyone chooses their own path, and I am not a soothsayer, Henry. But perhaps you are referring to the ambush at the pond, or the unfortunate incident that happened to you afterwards.
Huh? What? How the hell do you know all this?
As I say, I wander the world, and I listen to people.
He knows about the attack by the pond. He furthermore knows about the incident that occurred in Troskowitz, and his flimsy explanation that he simply loiters around and listens doesn't feel remotely close to a comprehensive explanation for how he came by that information. And it's not that it's entirely illogical, it's that Balthazar assigns what he knows about Henry to Henry's face, confidently and enigmatically identifying him in a way that seems to intentionally make Henry question how Balthazar knows his name. So pray tell, in a world before photographs, when paintings of individuals were for the most part reserved for people of status, how does he recognize Henry's face? I doubt he stumbled upon an eloquent serf who could not just accurately describe Henry's features, but painstakingly put into words every detail so Balthazar would know. So understandably, this man possessing so much knowledge about Henry, and only vaguely highlighting how, grants Balthazar an uncanny presence. When you consider the fact he immediately recognizes a man he's never met and seems to know what events he's been involved with, when it's unlikely he was present for any of it. Understandably, this unsettling insight results in Henry responding to Balthazar in a way that can only be described as uncharacteristic paranoia.
You're following me? Are you out to kill me? Who hired you? Speak!
Henry, that's deplorably paranoid of you. Why on earth would I be stalking you? After all, nobody has paid me to do such a thing, and I do not work for free. Whether I am to thrust a dagger in someone's back or slip poison into their wine.
My God. Who are you?
You hold no interest for me. At least, not yet. Well, unless you have toothache, perhaps. And so I ask, does anything ail you?
I say Henry's response is uncharacteristic not because it's necessarily out of character, but because his response is infinitely more panicked than the rest of the dialogue options. and since the dialogue options don't convey tone, we stumble into choosing it. In other words, the desired effect is Henry losing control, and fear taking over as if he's suddenly awash with dread. It's not entirely surprising given Balthazar's disquieting level of knowledge regarding this man he's never met, but emphasis is emphasis. The game deliberately wants us to know something pushes Henry's emotions entirely off balance, which doesn't occur in an entirely separate encounter where Henry is once again confronted by an individual who virtually impossibly knows about him. But that encounter is perhaps worthy of its own video at some point. Anyway, beyond the heightening of Henry's alarm bells, we learn yet more about this puzzling man. He denies that Henry holds any interest for him, but doesn't necessarily attempt to put his mind at ease at that being a possibility by suggesting that if somebody was paying him, he would kill him. I can't imagine that being exactly reassuring, but it's oddly candid. Nevertheless, the idea that Balthazar is an assassin for hire doesn't seem to line up with everything else he can tell us.
Balthazar? You surely made that name up, didn't you?
That is none of your concern, but were you ever to seek me out, that name would definitely guide you to me.
Who are you really?
I am an itinerant barber-surgeon and healer. I relieve people of their pain. Henry, you would not believe what a fellow would do to escape pain in this world, without giving a thought to the next.
So he's potentially a killer for hire. He may stab, he may poison, which may or may not be a crude joke to waylay Henry's paranoia. Otherwise, he's an itinerant barber-surgeon who relieves people of their pain, and if one must seek him out, they are to use his name. A name Henry suspects is not his true name, an accusation Balthazar does not explicitly deny. But what's the purpose of this alleged pseudonym? It's worth questioning what he has to gain from potentially obscuring his true name. Why might that be protected information? And if you're going to assume an alias, why choose Balthazar? I suppose it's evocative and provocative at the same time. It's also a distinct name. It lingers in the memory. It's also traditionally acknowledged as one of the names of the three wise men, who, biblically, brought gold, frankincense and myrrh to the baby Jesus. So it's a commanding name indeed, a moniker of distinction, although in modern pop culture I can only see it being used to reference villains. Perhaps that's all unnecessary detail. The point stands that Balthazar is a name that leaves a lasting impression, and that is possibly its purpose here. As for its however indirect biblical connotation, I would hazard a guess at that being intentional. After all, medieval Europe was a highly theistic place. But let's shift onward from the name for now. We've already explored Balthazar's familiarity with Henry despite the two never having met before this encounter, and the cold calculated structure of his words, which, I might add, makes you think he's had these encounters before. He's very familiar with the dynamic of the conversation we're having with him. So before we shift into asking what wares he might be peddling, allow us to spare a thought for the particularity of what he's saying to us. When asked if he serves a master, he says he does, but not in the sense that Henry might think. He claims he helps people with pain and ailments, but doesn't go into any details regarding that, simply stating he's a barber-surgeon. He also specifies that he doesn't work for free, and has the following to say about those he aids.
You would not believe what a fellow would do to escape pain in this world, without giving a thought to the next.
Implying that the cost of his services might be a tad more abstract than money. What's being suggested here is that those who bargain with Balthazar may very well spiritually be trading far more than they realize, escaping pain in this world through his services, without considering what that might mean for the next. What could that even mean? Well, let's look at the facts. The events of Kingdom Come Deliverance II take place in Bohemia in the year 1403, at a time when the region was officially Roman Catholic. In short, that means heavy Christian. So the question becomes, what does the next world mean to a Christian? Obviously the afterlife, right? That binary idea of communion with God in heaven or eternal damnation to hell, widely considered to be a fate worse than death. I'm being careful with my words to avoid blatantly broadcasting that my religious education stopped when I was about 8, but the point I'm getting at is maybe this is what Balthazar means. Dealings with him have a soul cost. Enlisting his aid for short-term relief, even gratuity, might result in an afterlife that is, let's just say, less than ideal. This paints Balthazar as some description of an envoy from hell, and such an idea might reconcile the disparity between being an itinerant barber-surgeon, and as he simultaneously claims when dispelling Henry's paranoia, a killer for hire. What if his claim to help people with aches, pains, and other afflictions is a figure of speech? Idioms are a powerful tool, allowing you to say without saying. Combine that idea to Balthazar's vocal vagueness, it is plausible he is speaking non-literally, as a cognitive shortcut.
I tend to be quite skilled at relieving people of pain.
This, for instance, could easily mean something else. Pain can be physical. A broken leg, cavities in your teeth, stepping on Lego. Pain can be physical and literal, caused by illness and injury, treated with intervention, ointments, medicine. However, when you factor pain as also being emotional, mental, the root cause of the ailment can become very abstract, as can the treatment. Usually, a resolution is not as straightforward as taking medicine. Had it been, why would you seek out a wayfarer who goes by Balthazar and not an apothecary? There has to be a certain allure to eliminate the contest, otherwise resorting to enlisting the aid of a mysterious stranger just makes no sense. So when Balthazar says he deals with pain and other afflictions, he might very well be saying that he solves people's problems. And I doubt they are trivial matters, since he does imply he would kill us if somebody was paying him. It would seem then his clientele rank among the desperate, and his solutions to their woes are amoral. While he offers us such services, Henry doesn't need them, so we are unable to take Balthazar up on his offer to see what it is he's actually offering. However, he does double up as a merchant, so we can check his wares.
Well, show me what you have to offer, surgeon.
Are you sure you want to know?
I mean your wares. What wares can you offer me?
Bit of Gauntero Dim vibes, why not? Anyway, let's have a gander at the inventory we can purchase from him. The first noteworthy discovery are the strong poisons he sells, along with recipes for those strong poisons, and a potion for seeing in the dark. It's worth noting Balthazar's inventory is not remotely randomized, meaning it's to my knowledge identical every time, and what can be found was intentionally put there. The poisons grant credibility to his dubious, unconcerned morality, but what interests me more than the poisons are the dice he sells. He offers a Devil's Head die, which is a powerful addition to any dice set. In the stead of a 1, the Devil's Head die has a side that bears the Devil's Head. The benefit being, in superstitious times, people don't particularly like looking at it, so it could theoretically be any number. It cannot score on its own as a 1 or a 5, but if you have, say, 2 other 1s, then it too is a 1. If you have 2 other 6s, it too can be a 6. If you have 3 other 1s, it can be the 4th. Its drawbacks are peculiar in the sense that it doesn't mean anything on its own, but it works to your advantage more often than not. But this is not the only hellish die that Balthazar sells. The other is the Lou die, described simply as the first of the line of demonic dice. Yes, the other 2 dice in this line are called Sea and Fur. Combine these 3 into one word in that order, you don't need me to tell you what it spells. It would seem these dice are weighted to roll 6s, so if you have all 3, you may routinely find yourself rolling the number of the beast. So this guy possesses 2 dice strongly associated with hell, and a modest selection of highly potent poisons. He also has some leeched coal and wormwood, a herb that supposedly theologically represents judgment. As for the miscellaneous tat in his pocket, for some reason he has 30 bags of nails, 5 black feathers, a dead child's tooth powder, God knows where he got that, a flute, a lamp, and a sewing needle. It's an interesting assortment you've got there, Baz. The dead child tooth powder is almost certainly going to raise eyebrows. However, according to its description, it's just a luck talisman. The question we have to ask, of course, is there a fixed meaning to every item in Balthazar's fixed inventory? If we look at the most famed application of nails within the Bible, of course, we land on a rather central event of the faith, the crucifixion of Christ. The importance of the pious times we see before us cannot be understated. The nails may very well be symbolic of the suffering of Christ, or by extension suffering in general. It has to be said, black feathers are a little bit trickier to identify. Symbolically, it could mean anything, from encapsulating mystery to spiritual guidance. Trying to find a meaning from the Bible landed me on Psalm 91:4, the varieties of which liken God's protection to a bird nurturing its young. Balthazar having feathers in his inventory feels like a separation from this. He only has 5 of them, it's not exactly a wing's worth. You have to wonder if each feather symbolises somebody from whom God's protection has been seized. After all, Balthazar remarks those he aids are short-sighted and don't consider the consequences enlisting his help might have in the next world. As for the flute, in folklore that would appear to be an instrument with some seriously dark connotations, but that's par for the course with musical instruments. A fiddle would most certainly be more on the nose, but a flute could quite possibly mean anything. But it is a form of playing pipe, which is always going to draw my mind to perhaps one of the more famous bits of Central European folklore, the Pied Piper. A legendary, piper, appeared in 13th century Hamelin, Germany, agreeing to resolve the town's rat problem, luring them away with his music, only to later be denied the agreed payment, so he returned and lured the children of Hamelin away. No doubt the moral of such a story is the significance of your word and the potential cost of breaking it. Assign that idea to a man who makes deals that may or may not have consequences lasting well past death. The presence of a pipe instrument of some variety in his inventory may be symbolic of those bargains. Considering it's musical, it may furthermore represent the allure. Music is uniquely enchanting. Moving on, we have a lamp. A common theme in my research is a lamp can be symbolic of knowledge and wisdom. It is a guiding light. Knowledge and wisdom mark the backbone of guidance. I feel like that one's pretty blatant. Unfortunately, the lamp cannot be used. As for the lamp's description, they say it's darkest under a candlestick, but have you ever seen the shadow this lamp casts? The meaning of the saying the darkest place is under the candlestick is that the obvious things are frequently overlooked, and trouble often thrives close to the source of light. It's worth noting this lamp is not unique to Balthazar, but it's such an interesting proverb in the context of Balthazar, who supposedly aids people with ailments and pains, people whom he notes to be short-sighted. Those people are missing something obvious and important, and that to me feels like a rather interesting meaning for the lamp. Finally, we have the sewing needle, the tool used to guide thread through fabric. It's perhaps interesting to view the fabric as the world itself, and the thread as a life. The needle dictates where in the world that life goes, and the effect it has on the world. The people whom Balthazar bargains with surrender control over that to him. The sewing needle therefore feels symbolic of influence, powerful when directing thread, otherwise redundant without it. What shapes the world, then, is what we allow. It could also just be a sewing needle. I mean, Balthazar's a barber-surgeon fella. Stitching up wounds. Pretty handy. To summarise, Balthazar's got an interesting assortment of tat. I am not entirely sure how much stock I'd put into the symbolic meaning or potential symbolic meaning behind the miscellaneous items, However, I couldn't just not mention nor explore it. However, the dice especially draw me towards the belief the game is trying to suggest Balthazar might not be of this mortal world, whether he be some demonic figure or the devil himself, and that clicks when you acknowledge he more or less perfectly fits the bill of the Twainian mysterious stranger archetype. Balthazar's cadence is detached. He doesn't seem especially fussed about morality. He brings into focus the curiosity of human nature, how they'll do anything to escape pain in this world without giving a thought to the next. And he possesses uncanny knowledge about Henry. There is clear intention to establish a creepy vibe in this interaction. We come away from our encounter with this man knowing more than when we started, but also less. Every detail is vague, open to interpretation, and tailored to activate that scratching subconscious response you sometimes get when you know there's more than meets the eye. The only thing, of course, the literal presence of a demon or the devil, or any other kind of hellspawn, in a realistic night game, is undoubtedly somewhat contentious. Much like its predecessor, Kingdom Come Deliverance II steers hard away from any fantasy elements. But what if that becomes part of its portrayal of belief? These are highly religious times in a highly religious place, a time before we had the encompassing, comforting eloquence of science to the mind-boggling extent we do today. What would Henry, a man raised as the son of a blacksmith, believe, having no concept of the true extent of knowledge we in contemporary times take for granted? To us in the 21st century, the idea of a god and an accompanying religious tapestry can be a thought experiment. In 15th century Bohemia, God was a fact of life. In failing that, it most certainly was in a social sense, so living in accordance with your faith was a more naturally dominant part of living, and contending with the devil and demons would have been a much more accepted part of that in prospect. As such, we're exposed to a lot of this as belief. We can encounter a man under a tree attempting to summon the devil outside Sameen at night. He'll mistake us for his own success and ask us for our favour. Also in the Trotsky region, that iconic landmark, Trotsky Castle, we can learn it has a strong association with hell. We can even become involved in expelling demons from it, a quest that gives us ridiculous anecdotes, a tour of toilets, has us partake in convoluted rituals nobody can agree upon the specifics of, and allows us to terrorise Sir Hans.
Did you hear? Apparently there's demons in the castle.
Damn it! If they weren't before, you surely just summoned them here yourself.
What? How?
Every time you say the word demon, one shows up. Don't you know that? Some words just shouldn't be used.
You just used it yourself.
Kurva! You tricked me, you blackguard!
A demon!
Stop it, you madman! I'm deadly serious. You have no idea what you're messing with. They really worked me over when I was little.
A demon!
Kingdom Come Deliverance II most certainly does not lack for jokes at superstition's expense. Of course, in a quest suggesting the presence of demons, we're not going to find any demons. But Henry's a believer, so despite the blacksmith jovially sending him from one bog to another, while the shit-eating grin inflates like a balloon, there's still enough going on to immerse you in the idea that maybe there might be some credibility to all this. We might not see demons, but we do get an anecdote of Otto von Burgo battling Satan, and in conversation with him, even he believes, Henry believes, the cynical Chamberlain believes, at least as far as I can tell. The priest believes, the cook believes, even the scholar whose clothes I stole.
The devil, as the enemy of both God and man, makes every effort to seduce the soul onto the road to hell, and to harm people however he can. How do you imagine the forces of evil?
A pig's face. Warts all over, and a nasty smell coming from its mouth. Kinda like your mum.
My mum's dead.
So's mine.
Anything else?
The point I'm trying to make is how genuinely outlandish would a demon actually be in this setting, or indeed the devil himself. As far as Western and Central Europe was concerned, the reality-altering implications of that were just the accepted facts of the age. Nevertheless, it would be too forthright, perhaps even disinteresting, to reward our demon hunt with demons, but it would be a stroke of genius to allude to the prospect of their existence in another, more subtle way, like an eerie encounter with a detached man of vague profession, seeking to strike a deal with the locals at the roadside. A man who has a tendency to spawn in the vicinity of crossroads, junctions long associated with being where different worlds bleed into one another, and critical decisions about the way forward are made both literally and metaphorically. And I can't think of a more life-altering decision than a Faustian pact, like the ones Balthazar supposedly offers, putting his self-described confounded nature to work, suggesting his ability is inexplicable, confusing, perhaps even irksome to him, which would suggest he's been at it for a very long time. However, all that being said, he seems to be mortal. You can kill him, and like you'd expect any man to, he kind of dies. So if we are to persist with this theory, we need to clear this up, and quite possibly relocate his remains. Fortunately, theology has an answer for everything, and if it doesn't, the occult will. It's not an unheard of idea for a demon, or perhaps even the devil, to appear like an ordinary person to deceive. And considering how hell is understood, luring actual mortals to it through deception might be their most effective tool. The more likely answer in the game sense is the devs likely didn't think the player would wantonly slaughter Balthazar, but the fact that you can really isn't a hole in the theory at all. That being said, I've alluded to another entity in this game already. It is worth mentioning consideration went into that. So there is an entirely irrelevant mysterious entity in this game that you cannot kill, and has no name, but it isn't Balthazar. Take from that what you will. But to summarise before we conclude, we have a classic mysterious stranger archetype character we meet at the roadside who possesses uncanny knowledge about Henry. He alludes to aiding people with aches, pains, and displays a detached amoral attitude. He alludes to the idea the cost of his assistance is only truly realised in the next world. As for his wares, he sells not one but 2 dice with hellish connections, along with potent poisons that no doubt enhances the sinister vibe he gives, all while hiding behind a false name as if knowing his true name would grant us power over him. As the effect in reverse, him knowing Henry's name can be seen in action. He tries to draw Henry in to enlist his services, but is ultimately unable to persuade. And on top of all of that, he claims to serve an abstract master, and refuses to elaborate on most of what he says. So it would seem then we are dealing with some caliber of trickster, whether that be the devil, a demon, or something else. The game's very careful to ensure that its inclusion can amount to little more than an Easter egg, so it doesn't bugger up the realistic immersion the game is going for. I believe these connections are intentional, and to conclude, let's take a look at the game's own codex entry on devils. Demons, or chorts, are mythical and fairy tale inhabitants of hell specific to Slavic cultural context. While in the rest of Europe, people refer to demonic creatures as devils and attribute purely negative intentions to them. In Czech folklore, we lean towards the image of demons as mischievous, malicious, and often foolish beings depicted with goat horns, a tail, and hooves on their feet, subservient to the will of the ruler of hell, Lucifer. Medieval magical thinking attributed various qualities to demons. Many a castle had a notorious gate to hell in its basement. Many a mill or abandoned building served as their abode. Demons smelled bad, caused disturbances, and were blamed for hens not laying eggs, milk souring, and food spoiling. While the church refuted other originally pagan beliefs, it assimilated demons for its purposes, portraying them as tempters and punishment for believers who weren't devout. With that in mind, we know that Balthazar isn't some mischievous entity that causes milk to spoil. He lacks the goat horns and the tail. He doesn't look like he's run clean out of hell to cause foolish chaos, but that more mainstream church view is tacked on at the end of this description. The question there becomes, is Balthazar a personification of temptation? Well, given everything we know, I think the answer is yes. So is Balthazar a demon? A devil? Let me know in the comments. It's most likely he was included as a bit of a joke, but you can blame Warhorse for making that joke interesting. But like I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on our Crossroads friend, because while Kingdom Come Deliverance is meant to be about realism, about authenticity, about no fantasy, reality is a subjective thing, and our perception of it is heavily influenced by what we believe it to be. So the question we must ask is, does faith being added to the mix really alter what reality would be to somebody living in early 15th century Bohemia? I don't think so. In fact, I'd argue the opposite. Excluding faith, or any evidence that there might be some weight to it, would be more outlandish in that sense. Anyway, I bring this highly verbose video to its end. I thank you for putting up with me. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated. And of course, if there are any other ideas you have for Kingdom Come Deliverance, either 1 or 2, that could fit this sort of remit of a series, let me know in the comment section. I have a few ideas of where to go with it. There's another encounter not too dissimilar to this one that's worthy of exploration in depth. And it's like I said at the start of the video, these are the kinds of videos that I enjoy making most. Latching on to a small detail, a passing interaction, something fascinating, and exploring it in more depth than seems sane. If you're down for that kind of content and you've made it to the end of this video, maybe join us on our Discord server. It's quite a modest environment. There's still under 100 people in there, but if you like this caliber of content, then please feel free to jump on board. But look, with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, please take care and goodbye.